And as expected, the royal houses were filled with intrigue, betrayal, and the murder of pharaohs and palace cops. But we will not read the history of palace unrest on the walls of royal tombs. This is often depicted in the tombs of the nobles, who described various events that took place in the palace. The pharaohs themselves, as the deputies of God, did not describe their fall in the eyes of the people and gods. Ramesses III was killed by the women of his house. His throat was cut. We do not know the reason, but we know the fact that when the women of the royal house came in front of the judges, they amazed everyone with their beauty and refinement, and as a result, the judges fled with the royal wives to modern-day Sudan. The wives were found and their noses and ears were cut off, so they could no longer seduce anyone. The heyday of art comes in the time of Senusret III, King Senusret III, who subjected Nubia, one of the smartest people of his time. He sent expeditions to study the floods of the Nile, founded ministries, builder of temples throughout Egypt. In Nubia, he was revered as the patron saint of this land, despite the fact that during his conquest, he drowned it in blood. The statues of this king are masterpieces of portrait realistic art. The Sphinx with the king's head is made from obsidian. We will not find in this vase a single feature from the old canon. Every element is representative of an individual portrait: oblique eyes which are deeply seated in their orbits, a large nose, prominent cheekbones, a large imperious mouth with slightly lowered corners of the lips. A huge amount of faience products were found in Egyptian tombs. Faience was considered a valuable material, and its price was on par with gold. Faience was perceived by the Egyptians as a precious stone. At the end of the 4th millennium BCE, faience appeared. Ritual sculptures of animals were made from it. A large number of animals were divine. During the construction of the temples, a cache was made in the foundation, in which sculptures were placed, such as Thoth, the god of wisdom. It is noteworthy that most of the ceramic products are turquoise and green. This color is associated with life. It is important to the goddess Hathor because she was symbolized by this color. The addition of malachite and turquoise to gray clay while it was baked gave a rich turquoise color to the products. And this transformation was seen as something sacred. A mold made of clay was filled with paste and heated at a temperature of 800 degrees. Egypt is poor in wood, and small kilns were used for this process. The museum has a rare find: molds for the production of beads. By the way, hanging ceramic beads as a door fence were first used in Egypt. The museum's collection boasts various unique faience pieces. We got acquainted with the first artifact in the first halls. This is a tile for decorating the wall of the Pyramid of Djoser. Another unique item of the Egyptian collection is William the Hippo. Hundreds of sculptures of hippos are kept in museums around the world, but only the most valuable ones are given a name. William was found in a swaddled mummy. If you look closely, you can see that 3 legs of the figurine are not original, but they are a part of the restoration. Hippo, the king of the Nile, a strong animal, symbol of chaos. His legs were ritually ripped off so that he could not harm the deceased in the form of a resurgent entity. The body of the animal is covered with water, plants, and lilies. Such sculptures were made for middle-class people who could afford a tomb but could not afford to finish it. Instead of paintings, the tomb was filled with ritual sculptures. Hippo hunting is one of the traditions in Egypt. It is often depicted on the walls of tombs. It was seen as a battle against chaos. The hippopotamus is a symbol of chaos that must be defeated. But, as with everything in Egyptian beliefs, Hippo has 2 essences. The female hippo was associated with the guardian of the world order and the protector of motherhood in the form of a pregnant female hippo. Another material for the manufacture of stone plastics is the so-called soapstone, ceatite. The stone is soft, and when glaze is applied, we get a translucent effect, which differs from earthenware with its deep, saturated color. Jewelry was made from ceramics, which were as valuable as gold. Each expedition enriched the museum with unique finds. Metropolitan specialists found a burial site filled with broken statues. Look at the face of this pharaoh. Before you is one of the outstanding women of Egypt, Hatshepsut. She was called the Golden Falcon and the Son of God. She was the daughter of the king and the great wife of the king. She became the only successful woman, pharaoh. She ruled for more than 20 years. Thutmose I had 4 children, but by the will of fate, Hatshepsut is the only surviving daughter. After the death of Thutmose I, his son from his younger wife, Thutmose II, ascends to the throne, but he doesn't have enough royal blood, so Hatshepsut had to become his wife. Marriages between brothers and sisters were common in the pharaoh's family. On the surviving reliefs, even during the life of her husband, she was depicted as a fully fledged ruler of Egypt, with attributes of power. Thutmose II dies early. Hatshepsut has a daughter, and he had a son with a younger wife. For 7 years, Hatshepsut was the regent for this son, the future pharaoh, Thutmose III. This regency was fruitful. Egypt flourished. At this time, the regent made 2 military campaigns and emerged victorious. What happened in the 7th year of the regency, we do not know. At one time, Hatshepsut and Thutmose III are portrayed as co-rulers, as 2 ruling kings. Apparently, a party was formed that supported the usurpation of power, so that Hatshepsut remained in charge. This is not surprising, since Hatshepsut was one of the smartest women of her time. The duality of the position of the queen is very interesting. For ritual activities, Hatshepsut wore a false beard, and for the sake of the rituals, she had to present herself as a man. But other records and drawings show her as a woman. She had a lover, Senen Mutt. He had more than 30 titles. He was a military leader and a very talented man. The main achievement of Hatshepsut's lover is the temple of the Deir el-Bahari. He was the architect of this great temple. He applied many innovations, and today, this building delights us with its grandeur and architectural finds. In early Christian times, there was a Coptic Christian monastery in it, and many murals of the temple were destroyed. On the back wall of the temple, spiteful critics made an erotic drawing where a man in an architect's cap had sexual intercourse with a woman from whose head the attributes of royal power fall. The Brooklyn Museum has a carnelian image of the goddess Hathor, the goddess of love. The back is covered with letters. This is a royal gift from Hatshepsut to her lover, with a declaration of love. The Metropolitan is proud of the hall, dedicated to the queen. Iconic statue in marbled crystalline pink limestone. She is wearing a man's loincloth, shended, a man's royal headscarf. This statue should be an object of worship after death. To bring the statue to life, she went through a series of ceremonies and painted the statue. A piece of a handkerchief from the back was found in the sand and it retained the pigment. This statue is the main piece of the Metropolitan Museum, which never leaves the walls of the museum. Another monument is the head and legs of the queen, and the torso is kept in the Netherlands. When in the 20th century they discovered the burial of the kings, which I will talk about later, they found a box with her name. It contained the queen's liver and her tooth. Howard Carter found a mummy in a tomb in the Valley of the Kings. After the autopsy, they noticed that the mummy's hands were folded, like in the mummies of women of the pharaoh's family, and the tooth fits perfectly. DNA analysis confirmed it was Hatshepsut. She died from cancer. Thutmose III waited for the throne for 20 years. He also became a great ruler. This pharaoh is a conqueror, Egyptian Napoleon. 367 foreign cities were conquered during his lifetime. There is an indisputable fact that the destruction of the name of Hatshepsut began in the 20th year of the reign of Thutmose III. Inscriptions and monuments depicting Hatshepsut as a pharaoh and ruler were destroyed. Everything connected to her was destroyed. There is evidence that the daughter of Hatshepsut became the wife of Thutmose III, but he didn't love her, and after her death, her name was changed. It should be noted that Hatshepsut and Thutmose III belong to the 18th Thutmose dynasty, which include the heretic Akhenaten, his wife, the beautiful Nefertiti, and Tutankhamun. But let us return to the tombs. The Egyptian pyramid is not about death. The pyramid is a concept of eternal life. In addition, the tomb is like a book about the life and role of a person, the history of the country and specific people, religion and gods, and everyday life, death as the rebirth of the next entity. For the dead, the tomb is a repetition of birth. The most complex ritual of embalming involves a mixture of sodium carbonate and bicarbonate, as well as salt. Modern science has identified the process of preparing the mummy and the substances that were used in it. Obviously, before the body of the pharaoh is ready for the transition to the realm of the dead, it must be prepared, and the ritual of cutting the tongue and eyes out was first. Next, all organs must be removed from the body, with the exception of the heart. In some cases, the kidneys were left. The organs were stored separately in ceremonial vessels, kantba. The pharaoh's brain was also removed, but in a slightly different manner from the rest of the organs. A hole was made at the base of the skull. The brain was taken out in small portions and thrown away. The first step in embalming was to dry the body. For this purpose, sodium carbonate and bicarbonate of natural origins was used, which were collected from dried lakes. The mixture was mainly sodium carbonate and bicarbonate. In addition to absorbing water, sodium carbonate and bicarbonate washed out fatty tissues from the body. The presence of sodium carbonate and bicarbonate prevented the decomposition of the body. After the drying was over, soda was removed from the body. In the next stage, the body was stuffed with sawdust and flax, using many additives: cinnamon, myrtle, frankincense, cassia, etc. According to some reports, even onions. All these ingredients, presumably, were supposed to eliminate unpleasant odors. After careful preparation of the body, it was time to wrap it with linen bandages. Often, before the procedure, the body itself was lubricated with a small amount of oil, and the bandages were soaked in resin. The resin-soaked bandages dried, and they protected the body from water, oxygen, and germs, preventing its subsequent decomposition. All holes were sealed with beeswax. The burial chambers were filled with household items that the deceased might need in the afterlife. Sometimes, the pyramids of the predecessors were plundered so that the new pyramids could be filled with objects from ancient dynasties. The mummy, when wrapped with linen, was covered with jewelry. The most popular accessories were perhaps necklaces worn by both women and men. They were made from gold plates, beads, or pendants of various shapes. The traditional decoration of ancient Egypt was the so-called sun necklace, which was fixed on a leather lining. It resembles a collar. The pharaoh's necklace could weigh several kilometers. Often, this item was used as a reward for distinguished commanders and officials. It was incredibly popular among both women and men to wear bracelets, which could be made from a variety of materials: gold, bone, beads. They wore bracelets on their forearms, wrists, and legs. Women's anklets were sometimes adorned with bells that chimed melodiously as they walked, making women move smoothly and softly. Often, bracelets, male and female, were decorated with the Eye of Horus, which served as a talisman and protected the owner from evil spirits and misfortunes. Magical and religious properties were often attributed to jewelry. So, various talismans and amulets were common in Egypt. Rings in ancient Egypt were also worn by both sexes. The only difference could be that male officials often used signet rings with initials and symbols. Earrings were also common, especially in the form of rings and circles, symbols of the sun. Pendants of various shapes, as well as chains, were attached to them. As a result, the weight of the earrings could be such that it deformed the earlobe of the wearer. However, this did not bother the Egyptians at all. Sandals made of pure gold were found in the tombs of the pharaohs. According to the ancient Greek historian and philosopher Herodotus, one such golden sandal represented the annual income of a whole city. At first, such sandals were intended exclusively for important people. Sandals were worn by pharaohs, priests, and in rare cases, their entourage. The pharaoh himself wore sandals only for some celebration or for an exceptionally important event, but he always had them at hand. And therefore, in ancient Egypt, there was a very honorable position, the sandal bearer, which was entrusted to only a person of great importance, who served the pharaoh. The ties on the sandals were ornamental. Think of it as a uniform decoration. Women, even the wives of the pharaohs, were forbidden to wear sandals. They always walked barefoot. Strange shoe discrimination against women. It was probably hard for the wives of the pharaohs to have well-groomed feet. We know very well the last resting places of the pharaohs, but what about their daily life? How they lived, where their life and palace intrigues took place. In many ways, one can see the palaces of the first pharaohs by observing their images. In the tradition of Egypt, the facade of the pharaoh's house is depicted in hieroglyphs, and the pyramidal temples often repeated the facades of palaces with a similar one. By the way, the king's house is denoted by the word phar, hence the modern name pharaoh came from. Palaces have not survived to this day, but thanks to modern technology, aerial photography has helped us to see the layout of a giant palace. This palace belonged to the son of Senusret III, Amenemhat III. He inherited a prosperous Egypt. He defied himself during his lifetime. Amenemhat III constructed a huge number of monuments during his reign. The architecture of a typical palace was a building of a cubic shape, the diversity of which was diluted by ristolets, columns in the form of bouquets, of papyrus flowers, towers, and niches. All facades were brightly decorated. The palace always stood on a high platform, sometimes up to 13 meters. This saved the Nile from the high flood, and it had a defensive function as well, like a hill rising from chaos. Passages to various rooms of the palace were separated by mats. The scope and splendor of the Amenemhat III palace is different from the typical one, and its dimensions are outstanding. It was made using raw bricks. The plan of the palace, that has 60 rooms, was recreated using aerial photographs. The ceiling of the temple fell to the floor, and during excavations, scientists from the Met expedition correctly identified the layers and separated the murals. This is a partially restored part of the ceiling painting depicting flying doves that adorned the ceiling in the pharaoh's bedroom. In the room adjoining the pharaoh's bedroom, we find a repeating pattern of the head of the goddess Hathor.